anything in 6 chapters, and a lot happens in these 6 chapters in John, right? Jesus is betrayed as he said he would be. Jesus is denied as he said he would be. Jesus is in the tomb for 3 days as he said he would be. And early Sunday morning, Easter Sunday, that first Easter, when Mary Magdalene first reported that Jesus' body was missing, Thomas probably felt like he was in good company. Right? Let's just zoom out here and think about this. None of the apostles, except perhaps John, really believed that Jesus was alive. But then the woman claimed to have seen him. And then Peter. And then a follower named Cleopas. And then that evening, with Jesus' body still gone, and everyone wondering about Mary's story and the accounts that she was talking about, Thomas decides to go down to the store for a pack of donuts and a coffee and maybe a cigarette. I don't know. I'm kidding. Right? I don't know where he went. But for some reason, Thomas decided to get out and to go for a walk. Right? He decided to go out and go for a walk, and the rest of the disciples stayed behind in a locked door meeting because they were a little scared. And when Thomas gets back, all of Thomas's closest friends suddenly appeared. All of them state that Jesus suddenly appeared to them in the middle of this locked door meeting where he spoke and he even ate with them. And Thomas missed it. And so Thomas found himself in some really bad company. Right? The only other disciple that wasn't there was Judas. Right? Not good company. And let's listen to their conversation. He gets back from getting his donuts and coffee and doing whatever. All right, and Jesus had appeared to the disciples, and now he's gone. Jesus is gone, and Thomas is back. And this is what it says in John 20, verses 20 through 24. Go ahead and turn there. It says, now Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. When donuts call, you got to go. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see in the hands the mark of the nails and place my finger in the mark of the nails and place my hand into his side, I will never believe. Yikes. Right? That's pretty intense. Yikes. All right, where's that strong man who would follow Jesus anywhere, even to death? Well, I think there are a few things at play here, but the biggest might just be the way that Jesus died. I mean, think about it, right? The accounts of Jesus' death are sparse on detail in the New Testament. So it's hard for us, sitting here today, to understand, for us to feel and understand what Thomas felt as he actually watched Jesus die 3 days earlier. I mean, think about that. In fact, Thomas's statement that we just read, the statement of unbelief where he says, unless I see his hands, the mark of the nails, is the only time that nails are actually mentioned in the Gospels as a part of Jesus' crucifixion. Right? So most of what we know about Roman crucifixion, we learned from other sources. Jesus just didn't fall over dead, brutally beaten. His skin was torn to shreds and torn from his rib cage and from his back. Right? His face was probably beaten to where it was unrecognizable. The slaughter of Jesus outside of Jerusalem had been so gruesome that it was all but impossible for Thomas, this man who was there witnessing it all, to imagine a resurrection of Jesus' body, which had been broken and beaten and it was just ripped to shreds. And I know what you're saying. Wait a second, Andrew. Didn't we just talk about Thomas following Jesus to see his friend Lazarus at the beginning of all of this? And didn't Jesus raise Lazarus from the dead? Yeah. Right? Thomas was there. You're right. Thomas did see Lazarus' resurrection. But Lazarus had died of an illness, and Jesus had to raise him. But now, Jesus, the God that he's forging his life on, Thomas is forging his life on, how does a mutilated man who had went through this Roman crucifixion raise himself when he's torn to shreds? So let's not assume too quickly that we would have responded differently had we seen what Thomas had seen and witnessed what he had witnessed. The death of a man he had life to follow, literally his whole life, everywhere. He was concerned, and he wanted some facts. So let's keep reading. Verse 26. It says, 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Stop right there. I know we didn't finish the whole verse. Right, I love this. Real quick, I want to point this out. Right, Jesus was not in a hurry to relieve Thomas's doubts. Just track with me here, right? Right? He let Thomas stew on his unbelief for 8 days. And can you imagine how awkward this is? Right? Let's think about it. Everyone around Thomas, everyone around him was celebrating. Everyone was partying. Everyone was like, Jesus is alive. The tomb is empty. And they're angry that he went to go get donuts. Uncomfortably alone. Right? In the midst of a joyful fellowship of believers for 8 awkward days. So I guess the saying is true, right? Every party needs a pooper. And that's why Thomas is, I'm kidding. But I really want us to think about this for a moment. Right? Think about those 8 days for a second, because this is where the meat is. Story. 8 days of what? Doubting. Of heartbreak. 8 days of just worry and stress and concern. When everyone around you is happy and excited and full of hope. So let me ask you something. Have you ever come to church and thought, man, I have no idea why I'm here? Just me? Right? I've been there, right? Church, let's be honest. There are Sundays where we walk in here and we think, man, this week it's just been awful. The people I work with quite possibly are the worst people on the planet. My family has gone temporarily insane. Everything seems to be going wrong. And don't get me started on God. Because if he's up there, he certainly doesn't seem to care about me. No, I've been, and I'm the preacher. Right? It's painful. It's hard. It makes us angry, and it's a little bit awkward. Thomas knows that feeling. But you know what he did? Right? He kept showing up. Right? He kept showing up. He stayed for 8 days with the pain and the anger and the doubt. He stayed. I once heard a story that illustrates this beautifully. It was about from author and pastor Nadia Bolz-Weber. She was speaking, and during the question and answer session at the end, a guy stood up and said, I have had faith, and it was so strong, but now I'm doubting. I feel weak in my faith. What should I do? And Bolz-Weber's answer was simple. She simply said this. She said, you can take a break now. Let someone else on the pew be strong for you. Take a break now and let someone that you're sitting next to be strong for you. And that is what Thomas is doing. That's what we're reading about. He does not believe, but he's surrounding himself with people who do. He is struggling to understand how Jesus could be so brutally beaten and killed, totally physically broken, and still come back to life, but yet he's staying even though he's wondering those things. The dude sat his butt down in a room of people who believed and wasn't going to go anywhere until it was resolved. And it was, of course. Right? We see that it was resolved. Read with me the rest of 26 in verse 29 through 29. So 8 days later, the disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and God." And Jesus said to him, "Have you believed me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." All right, so Jesus, he comes and he shows him his scars. Man, our God. And Thomas's response is powerful. His reaction to the risen Christ, to his king is what Christ means, is to call him what? God. Lord. God. He says, "My Lord and my God." It's a power that comes out of Thomas here. He knows that when he saw the risen Jesus, that he truly was encountering God, his creator, and he should submit his life and all authority that he has should be given to God, because that's who he's going to forge his life on. I don't think that he would ever forget that. His life was forever changed. I think his story can forever impact our lives as well, Foundry. Right, real quick, there's just 3 little things that I think we can take away and that we can put in our pocket and we can apply to our lives as we forge a lifelong reliance on God. Right, first, let me say this. In the church, I think we can sometimes give the impression that a genuine believer won't have any doubts. You know what I'm saying? I think we give off that impression. But this approach doesn't seem to be biblical in the life of Thomas. Right? Thomas boldly followed Jesus, no matter the cost, at every moment until this one. Everyone has a breaking point, and that's okay. Maybe for you, it's been a long time since you first came to faith, and you're really not sure about all this God and Jesus stuff anymore. Or maybe you're a logical and reasonable person, and faith isn't making sense right now. Or maybe you're an emotionally driven. Remember the last time that you felt the presence of God. Whatever it is, we have all had our doubts. We all have had moments where we wonder. Right? And here's what I want to make very clear today, is if you have doubts, you're in good company. If you have doubt, you're in good company. If you have them, right? There are some in the Bible that doubted God. Think about it. Everyone did. Right? Adam and Eve, Abraham, Sarah, Moses, David, Elijah, John the Baptist, and the list goes on and on. They were all doubters. Even Jesus' own family thought he was crazy. And the disciples, they ran away in doubt. Not just Thomas. Right? There was a dump truck full of doubters, and God doesn't give up on any. Instead, God says this: doubters are welcomed here. That's our God. Doubters are welcomed here. God didn't ask people to pretend and try to manufacture certainty. As the president of Truth Unites, Gavin Orland, once said, if you struggle with doubts, remember, Thomas was not Judas. That's a brilliant truth, right? Thomas doubted, but Judas betrayed. Those aren't identical. Right, church, just so if you're not aware, Judas is the guy who kissed Jesus' cheek to turn him over to the Romans, right? He's the one who betrayed Jesus, sold him out for 30 pieces of silver. Right, church, we're not somehow betraying God by asking questions, right? I do not say this to minimize the significance of your doubts. Yes, some doubts are sinful. Almost all doubt is also painful. And from what I've seen, some believers feel an immense sense of shame and embarrassment with their doubts. And so they hide their doubts in secret pain, and they wonder if they've ever even had true faith at all. But if the story of Thomas here teaches us anything, it is that genuine, amazing, world-changing Christians, people forging their life on God in the Bible, struggle with real. Don't be harsher in evaluating your spiritual status than God is. is what it comes down to. Right? God understands he can take it. Right? He will let you wrestle with the questions and come to him. In fact, if we will continue to forge a lifelong reliance on God and walk in the light to the best of our ability, doubts and all, God can actually use our uncertainty for good. Which leads us to the next thing that we can learn from the life of Thomas is this, right? Talk to people who talk to God. Talk to people who talk to God. Remember when Thomas was having his doubts, what did he do? He stayed with people who believed. He sat his butt down. Right? It was awkward and probably messy, definitely uncomfortable talking to them. He kept showing up. He stayed with the people who loved him through his doubts. There's a great story in Mark, the book of Mark, about a group of friends who carried their paralyzed friend to Jesus. In fact, they tear open the roof of the synagogue or the building that Jesus is in. They tear it off and they lower their friend down on a mat to the feet of Jesus. Right? And this is what I'm talking about. Doubts, and we will. It is vital that we surround ourselves with people who bring us to Jesus. We have to sit in the room and listen to others pray even when we can't. We have to listen to people, Foundry Church, who are still talking to God. And we got to listen to them talk to him. It reminds me of the story in the book of stories for the journey. In it, William R. White, he tells about a European seminary professor and his wife, Enid. World War II forced them to flee to America, where he found a job teaching. This man, Hans, was gentle, he was warm, he was beloved by his students, and he brought Scripture to life for them. Hans and Enid were very much in love. Nearly every day they took long walks together, holding hands, and they always sat close to each other in church and at lunch. And then one day, as always happens, Enid passed away, overwhelming Hans with sorrow. Right, worried because he wouldn't eat or take walks, the seminary president, along with 3 other friends, visited Hans regularly, but he remained lonely and depressed for years, experiencing the dark night of the soul, as C.S. Lewis calls it. Hans told his friends, "I am no longer able to pray to God." He says, "I am not certain that I believe in God anymore." After a moment of silence, the seminary president said, "Then we will believe for you. We'll make your confession for you. We will pray for you." So the 4 men met daily for years for prayer, asking God to restore the gift of faith to their dear friend. And after that, many months later, with Hans, he smiled and said, "It is no longer necessary for you to pray for me. Today, I would like you to pray with me." Listen, when we step up to the table, right, when we come together with people who understand our doubts, our worries, our concerns, our joys, our goals, all that, right? But it's doubts. When we come up to that table, they will help us carry it to Jesus. And that's forging a lifelong reliance on God. That's what it looks like together in church. It is doing the hard work and asking the hard questions and being with people who will say, "Let me help you through this. I got you." Because that is our final lesson from Thomas. Doubt is not the end. It's just the beginning. Right? It spurs us on. It helps us forge ahead. One of the most difficult things about doubt is that it can feel like nothing is happening. We can feel like God has gone silent. Scripture sounds empty. The nothingness can be hard to bear. But let me tell you, as your friend who is talking to God right now, that God doesn't do nothingness. Our God does not do nothingness. Right? That's the business that he is in. In Isaiah chapter 55, verses 10 through 11, it says this in the Message paraphrase. He says, "Just as rain and snow descend from the skies and don't go back until they've watered the earth, doing their work of making things grow and blossom, producing seed for farmers and food for the hungry, so will the words that come out of my mouth not come back empty-handed. They'll do the work I sent them to do. They will complete the assignment I gave them. The God that we forge our life in is not in nothingness. God is always up to something and always working. And this moment of doubt that we may find ourselves in will not be worthless. Found underneath the surface of our questions and our worries and our doubts is up to something. He's growing deep roots in us. He's building strong backs on us. He's shoring up our shield of faith. Early church history says that after Jesus ascended back to heaven, Thomas traveled outside of the Roman Empire as a missionary, possibly as far as to India, to preach the gospel, to preach what Jesus has done. Thomas got over his doubts about Jesus anywhere again. He was back to his bold and committed, created self. Our doubts are normal, Foundry, but they are not the end of our faith story. They're just the beginning. Right? They are the next step as we take and as we forge a lifelong reliance on God. Now, for those of you who don't know, for me, as an example, I deal with it on the regular. And one of the things that Christina has started saying to me is just take the next right step. Right? She has to remind me of that all the time. Probably annoying to her. Right? And I think that is all that God is calling us to do with our doubts. Just take the next right step. Right? Maybe that step is just acknowledging that you have some questions. Maybe that step is surrounding yourself with people who are talking to God because you aren't right now. For one of our table groups. And if you're like, oh, they started last week, I missed it. Last week was all admin. You can jump in. All right, connect at the resource center. Sign up today, all right, and you can still make it. Maybe that step is actually stepping out in faith and doing that hard thing that you feel like God is telling you to do, that you've been trying to avoid for a really, really long time. Right? It's okay to doubt. God can take it. Just do the right thing. And so today, as the band comes back up, I want to end by talking about a little movie that came out a few years ago, Justice League. I know. Not the best superhero movie out there, but let me just make a point here. In the movie, Batman assembles a team of superhero champions to take on an ancient entity named Steppenwolf. Great movie, right? All right, I'm being sarcastic. All right, he's leading an army in the hunt for a weapon powerful enough to destroy the planet. And so they're going to take on Steppenwolf. And so Batman, he gathers together Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Cyborg, and the Flash. And in their first battle together, the Flash finds himself paralyzed with uncertainty. Right? Doubt. By preparing to take on the evil Steppenwolf, the Flash tries to explain his emotional struggle. He says, here's the thing. See, I'm afraid of bugs and guns and obnoxiously tall people. Right? I can't be here, he says. It's really cool that you guys seem to be ready to do battle and stuff, but I've never done battle. I've just pushed some people away, and then I run away. He's having some serious doubts. And so Batman brings clarity to fear with two simple words. Does anyone know what? Save one. He just says, save one. The Flash is confused, so Batman clarifies. He says, save one person. The Flash asks, who should I save first? And Batman clarifies even further, don't talk, don't fight, get in, get one, get out. And the Flash says, and then what do I do? And Batman says, do it again, right? Don't talk, don't fight, get in, get out. Right? That is all that God is asking. Right? We don't have to talk, we don't have to fight, we just have to do the next right thing and then do it again.